there, it's Nicole for Lawn Fawn, and today's card showcases Lawn Fawn stamps and dies with a collaboration with Lucy's Little Things sequins. And I've combined the two to create this cute little fairy scene where the fairies look like they're sprinkling the confetti in the cloudy background. To start my card, I am stamping two of the fairies from the Fairy Friends stamp set on some smooth white cardstock, and I'm going to color in these fairies with Copic markers. I've used the Simon Says Stamp Ink Tints black ink to stamp these images. This is a great ink for stamping when you want to color with alcohol ink markers, as it's not going to bleed. I purposely picked colors of Copic markers that coordinate with the sequin collections that I'm going to be using. So the blues here are going to coordinate with the Forget Me Not Lucy's Little Things sequin pack. I purposely feathered in a little bit of blue into the fairy wings, and then I'm taking the Wink of Stella silver and clear glitter brush markers and coloring in those wings to give them a really pretty sparkly shimmery type of shine. Now I colored in the dress first, which I normally don't do. I did take the Sakura Stardust pen and add a little bit of a plaid sparkly detail to the dress. Once the dress and wings were colored, I went in and colored in the face and then added a little bit of pink for the cheeks. The first color I used wasn't quite dark enough, so I am going to go back in with R20 and pinken those cheeks a little more. I'm feathering in the hair. This is kind of a light, dirty blonde color with the three shades I'm using, E40, 43, and 44. There's a little R20 for the cheeks, and I'll blend it out with the E000. I'm going to go ahead and do the skin tone the same for the other fairy. However, this fairy, I am going to add different colors for the dress and wings that are going to coordinate with the kind of white silver sequin mix that I'm using. I'm using some warm grays for the wings and the dress. All very light, nothing higher than the warm gray 3 marker. Once I have the dress and the wings colored in, I'm again going to take the Wink of Stella clear glitter brush markers in silver and white and color in those fairy wings. Add a little bit of more Copic marker before I go in and do that. A little bit of silver, and then finish off with the clear. For the hair this time, I am going to do a dark black hair. I like to start with a light base. I'm using C3. Then I'm going to feather in my darkest color, the C8, and then my mid-tone color, which is going to be the C6. I'm going to build that up and go back over it with my darker color. Pull that out just a little bit further. That's really going to darken up the hair. Once these are completely colored in, I'll add a little bit of glitter to the dress again here. I'm going to take the coordinating Fairy Friends dies and die cut both of my fairy images. I'm also going to be using the fairy wands from the Fairy Friends stamp set, and I will get to those in a little bit. When I first started out the card, I kind of forgot about those, so I will have to go back and use those in a bit. I am die cutting a frame using the largest stitched rectangle frame die. I'm going to die cut that from vellum. Then I'm also going to die cut it from some white cardstock a couple of times, and also some Simon Says Stamp fog cardstock, which is a very, very light gray. It's going to coordinate with the sequin mixes I'm using for a little bit of color in the background. From one of those inside rectangle pieces, I'm going to die cut the Puffy Cloud Borders die several times from both the vellum and white rectangles. This is going to build up the cloudy scene. I'm using the large and medium-sized Puffy Cloud border dies and just kind of randomly die cutting those along those lines there, and then I'm going to layer those for the background. Next, I'm going to lay out my elements, and then I'm going to take a greeting from the Fairy Friends stamp set that reads, "Have a magical day." and I'm going to stamp that on my bottom border. I'm going to take a powder tool to this white cloudy border first, and then stamp the greeting on this using Versamark ink. Sprinkle on some Simon Says Stamp Silver Fine Detail embossing powder. That again is going to coordinate back with the sequins I'm using and everything else. And I will heat set that. And it's really going to pop nicely on this white. Once I have heat embossed my greeting, I am going to take some of the sparkly type of images from the Fairy Friends stamp set and stamp those on the background. I haven't attached any of the borders yet. I like to do any embossing prior to actually adding any adhesive because I want to try to keep the card as clean as possible and not have any of that embossing powder sticking to any little random bits of adhesive. So I'm going to carefully take each layer where I've stamped these little sparkly images, sprinkle those on, or sprinkle on the embossing powder, and then I will heat set all of that. Again, I'm using that silver embossing powder. Next, I'm going to go ahead and start building up that background. So I'm going to layer on the white and vellum cloud borders on my background. To hide the adhesive on the vellum, I'm adding little dots with the Zig glue pin, especially along that stitching line along the scalloped edge of the cloud, and then placing something heavy on top to just hold that down till the glue dries. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. However, I'm able to use some adhesive along the bottom edge because it's going to be covered up with a white cloud border. This is the one with the greeting embossed on it. Go ahead and attach both of my fairies. And then I am going to create a scattering of sequins with the two sequin mixes here. And I'm attaching these with some bling glue dots from Thermoweb. And I'm using a scattering of lots of different sizes and textures of the sequin mixes, including some of the confetti from each, so that it looks like each fairy is sprinkling some confetti in the clouds. So I'll just keep attaching all of these until I get all of my sequins and little confetti pieces adhered to my background scene. Next, I'm going to stamp the two fairy wands. Again, using the intense black ink, and then I will color in those fairy wands to coordinate with the outfits on each of the fairies. So one is going to have a blue star and one will have a light gray one. The wands are both going to be in dark gray using C6 and C8. And I'll add the Wink of Stella clear glitter brush pen to the star on each of the fairy wands and die cut those with the coordinating Fairy Friends dies and attach those fairy wands to the fairies, and I think that really finishes off that scene and gives the illusion that the fairies are sprinkling some fairy dust there in the clouds. I'm going to finish off my sequins with a scattering of clear gemstones in the center of some of the larger sequins. Some of the smaller ones I'm going to leave as is, but this just adds additional sparkle. I'll even add a few additional gemstones here and there throughout the design. I like to use a craft knife to adhere my sequins to, or my gemstones rather, to my project. I find it's easy to do that way. Next, I'm taking a white top fold card base from Simon Says Stamp and adhering my frame to that card base and then the inside panel. Then I'm going to stack two additional frames around that center panel to finish off the card design. And that is my Magical Day card featuring the Fairy Friends stamps and dies as well as other stamps and dies from Lawn Fawn. Thanks for joining me for this collaboration card between Lawn Fawn and Lucy's Little Things. Please check out the Lawn Fawn blog for more information. We'll catch you next time.